appreciative of all those words. I think obviously it's never easy to play against him, and I think he would have a good perspective of the defense and where it's progressed and kind of maybe some of the changes that it's gone through, and probably looks at where we're at right now and maybe a little bit different light of maybe where he saw it last time. But I would say with our guys, just in general with our defense, we're trying to, get better every week, and we're trying to modify and do some things that fit the players that we have and the ones that are out there and playing in those games. And I think the guys are working really hard in the back end and the front end to try to, get those calls, those fronts, the fundamentals, the coverages, all that stuff, to the proper techniques and to the proper execution. And we got a long way to go. But, certainly I think from a standpoint of us, we're trying to improve, trying to get better. There's some areas, obviously, we got to be more consistent in and kind of keep working that. But certainly, for myself with Coach Philbin, obviously, great coach, guy has, been around a long time and, really respect everything he has to say. So I appreciate that very much.
Coach, there's been a lot of talk about Matthew Stafford and his future going forward after this week. Trading, whatever, the Lions need to go in another direction. I wonder what you think about that if you want him to be your quarterback going forward.
Again, we are focused on this week right now. I think, like I've said all year, Matthew Stafford's an unbelievable quarterback. He's our quarterback. He's been fighting and battling and playing hard and leading this team throughout the entire course of the season. So, we'll obviously, just keep working and progressing and trying to grow and get better next year. And hopefully, we can do some things to help him. So, for us, we're focused on this week and, just trying to get better and trying to go up and play well in Green Bay and go out and succeed. But again, I have the utmost respect for him and everything that he does every single day and the way that he works. And he's my quarterback, and we're grinding every single day to get better. So I appreciate the way that he works, and it's been great from a standpoint of growth between he and I, and being able to have a chance to meet and learn and talk football and all that. And that's just a relationship that's real important for me. So that part of it's been positive. We just obviously the outcomes of all these things, we wish we were in better shape.
Is that a yes? Just to be clear, you didn't say yes in there. So do you want?
As far as
you want Matthew to be your quarterback next year?
Yeah, we're in a situation where Matt Stafford's our quarterback. That's what it is. So, like I said, I think the world of the guy. I think he's an unbelievable competitor. I think he's a great player, and I got to do everything I can to try to help him, as much as possible.
Probably there's a perception because he's not vocal like other quarterbacks who work with Brady and other quarterbacks who are more, vocal even when he speaks to the media. Is there anything anecdotal that fans need to know or should know that in your short time here, does he get pissed off? Does he throw things or stuff that we don't get to see as media or the fans?
Sure.
People latch on to that and they just don't see that.
Yeah. You know what? I think I can, let him always speak to, about himself as far as what his actions are. But as far as I'm concerned and the way I look at it as a head coach, I think his leadership and the way that he approaches every single week and, his drive at the game and his demand of excellence that he has for himself and the players and the people around him is everything you want. So I don't see any issue there whatsoever. So, as far as however he approaches that himself, he can speak on that and what he really wants out there that's not publicly seen. But from a head coach standpoint, all those things that he does do, absolutely. Leadership comes in different forms, and I think, and personally for us, and we talk to the team about this all the time, leadership, everyone's a leader. Everyone has to do their job. Everyone has to perform. Everyone has to, know their role and go out and execute it at a high level. All of us, coaches, staffs, players, all of it. And, when you do that, that's what's part of being a team is all about. And in certain situations, some guys may have to have more leadership than others, and certainly the quarterback position, the linebacker position, the safety position, those are ones that come to the forethought because a lot of the critical situations from a communication standpoint, those are the guys that have to do it. So from a communication leadership role, those guys have to be able to step up and do that. And, that's what our guys do. But from a play standpoint, leadership can come from everybody.
Players play, coaches coach, front office does their thing. How valuable is the input of Matthew as you go forward, you construct a roster, you talk about scheme? How valuable is the franchise quarterback's opinion to you in those things?
I would say that for me, all of our players, I think their voices and their opinions are important. It's easy to sit here and say the quarterback. It's just as easy to sit here and say the linebacker. but I think it's important that all of the pieces are heard. Everybody should have a thought, and I think for my standpoint, and when I work with Bob and we talk about things like that, we're definitely in situations where we try to gather as much information as possible and then try to make good decisions, in the end, to make decisions that are the best for the team and put the team first. But we always feel that as much information as you can gather, whether it's from a player, a scout, staff, whatever it is, you always want to take as much intel as you can before you make those decisions. So certainly, the guys that have been around here for a long time that have different experiences or maybe different views or have seen different changes go through, those are going to be great opinions to listen to and to have a voice. There's going to be guys that come from other organizations. They're going to have different experiences that are really important to listen to too, because they may have gone through similar situations. Obviously I have my own background to reference in some of those different situations too. So I think gathering all that information, trying to put it together, and then really make the best decision for this organization here and now. That's the most important thing from that standpoint.
What do you think about the job Jim Bob has done with the offense to this point in the year, considering all the injuries that you guys got?
Yeah, I mean, obviously not an easy job, right? So I think he's, every single week doing everything he can to just, put us in a situation to help the collective team, try to be in the end where we can win. It's a complementary game, all three phases working together, and the game is different each week depending on the opponent that we play and the strengths and weaknesses that they have. And sometimes that's been easily kind of seen, and then sometimes it's not, from the standpoint of there might be other underlining factors from, whether it's the opponent's players, our players, injuries, whatever the case may be. So I think, again, he's, Jim Bob works extremely hard. He's very smart. He's obviously, knows the system in and out, and obviously Stafford as far as trying to, get all of that on the same page. And it's not easy. This is not an easy game. It's hard. There's a lot of good players in this league. There's a lot of good players in this division. We got another really difficult game this week, a division game against Green Bay up in Green Bay. So none of these are easy. And again, we just try to do the best we can as a staff and as players collectively each week to give ourselves the best chance to win as a team. That's really what it's about, all three phases.
Packers question.
Packers.
Yeah. Darius Slay's had another good season, another Pro Bowl season. Had an off day last time he played the Packers against Adams. He talked about the difficulty of that matchup leading to it, just the release, particularly of Adams being a very big challenge for him. Just wondering, what does Slay need to do better in that particular matchup? He's obviously a very good, well-rounded player, but
Sure.
This particular matchup, what does Slay need to do better?
I think first part of that question will be we'll see what the matchups are, whenever they are. We can reference the game, before. I think at that point of the year we're still growing and developing with techniques and fundamentals and things like that, and I think some of those have developed through the course of the year. I think when you're talking about two great players here, two evenly great players, and sometimes you're going to be in good situations to win. Sometimes you're going to have help and it's going to be okay. Sometimes you're going to be by yourself and you're going to win, and sometimes there may be conflicts that the offense puts a defender in that makes their job a little bit more difficult. So all of those factors kind of go into it, and certainly we'll always go back in those particular situations to try to make sure our fundamentals are cleaned up from that standpoint, which we've been able to work through the course of the years: footwork, hand placement, pad level, eye control, hips, ankles, knees, all that stuff that we do from a fundamental standpoint, and make sure that that's consistent. I would say, in some of those situations where there's breakdowns in coverage, something went, maybe inconsistent through the course of the coverage, especially if it's a man situation. But, he's Adams is a really good player. Now, this guy's obviously done this for a while and has had a lot of success. And, Slay is one of those guys that goes out and fights and battles and, plays through it. But whoever's on him is going to have to do a great job. He's going to have to go out and perform at a high level because he is a very good competitive player, and they got a lot of them. Cobb is another one that's a real, really outstanding player that's, an issue when he's out on the field. Dallas Scantling's another guy, obviously Jimmy Graham. So they got a lot of skilled players out there that, put the defense in a lot of bind, and you might push coverage to one guy and another guy might be by himself, and, you got to go perform at that situation. But the great thing about Slay is that he's just, he has that toughness to go out and compete and go, and kind of that a little bit of that corner mentality where, all right, you get me once, but I'm going to get you the next time, and you just keep battling back and forth. So, he's just talking about two great players.
I should probably ask this. So there was a player, obviously, who said that you were late to team meetings frequently. I'm just curious, what sort of message does that send to players?
I think, it's hard. It's probably hard from, outside perspective. I would say, well, I don't really focus on too much of what's said outside the building or somebody that's not here. We have a lot of really good dialect. I think I've said this before, inside the building and what happens behind closed doors for our team as an organization. There's a lot of feedback from the players and the staffs and the coaches, and everyone's held accountable. And, the great thing about it is we're all in a situation where we're all trying to get better, in all those areas, and we're all trying to improve and make sure that we're, operating efficiently. We have a very tight schedule. We run a very structured schedule, and in those situations, it's constantly being evaluated, and there's constant feedback that comes back to try to improve it from that situation. And I think the big point of that would be there's going to be situations that come up where, and I've said this before, one of the hardest things or the most difficult things, or I've also used this as the advice I got, is that when there's a situation where somebody comes to you with a problem, I try to address that problem as the most important thing for me at that time, which I do, and spend the time to make sure that I clear that up, whatever it is, in whatever facet of the organization. And sometimes that happens, and you might be a couple seconds late to something here or there, but it's a very standpoint where it's with that sort of schedule, you have to be able to adapt, and some things might not always go off exactly when the clock ticks in a certain direction. But it's not a, I'll just make sure we get the response right here. It's not a situation where we're talking, 20, 30, it may be a minute or something that causes a delay, but that's, standard. That's kind of like a, pretty understood thing when people are working in a tight schedule, and we adapt to those things. And the players are great too, because we have to move some things around. We might have a meeting that goes a little bit longer because there's a point that needs to be made, or a practice drill that goes a little bit longer. And, the good part about it is that's just kind of, how we operate. That's the world we work in. And it's kind of, similar to how the game works. There's going to be things in the game that we got to adapt to and just respond to and handle. And the better you can do that, then the better you can make those adjustments too. So it's just a situation where, again, I don't really address or worry about what's said by somebody that's not in the building. We handle everything behind closed doors, and I know it's real difficult for probably your perspective, really, to be honest with you, because you don't really get a chance to see kind of what goes on behind the doors, and that's hard. It's hard to kind of get an understanding with that, but I would say that we continually change schedules because of the different weeks that we have, and it's a necessity to do that. So from that standpoint, there's, what we do and how we operate with the schedule and the tightness and the structure of it, with everybody in the building, from the video department to the staff to the coaches to the players. It's, it's kind of a situation where you just adapt and you move on. I don't really think it's anything other than that. Yep.
Thank you, Matt.
Yep.